definitely want to pick your brain a little bit. How do you feel about lending, in general? How do you feel about how it's doing today? I'm looking at the caps right now and it's 112% full. So obviously, there's a lot of demand for lending,
Hmm.
and there's an obvious, cap on it as it's still a pretty early feature in its life cycle. So how do you feel about it in general, and how do you feel about, the discussions that are going on around lending?
I think it's fascinating. Like as a because we've written a lot about it. It takes up a significant portion of unit. It's a in our learning program that's coming up. Sorry, I started thinking about what I needed to do for it later. Um, but yeah, so like we have a whole section on caps and a unit on caps as to all of the caps that are in THORChain, and the lending cap is just another safety mechanism. And so like lending is no different in the THORChain ethos of safety and security. And this is my perspective. Because there are caps everywhere that there needs to be a cap, or there could be a cap. There are caps, and the fact that that I mean, 112% is a little over the cap, but um, I really I see that, and I saw a JP tweet not too long ago, and it really kind of it was a little light bulb that went off, and I didn't acknowledge this until he said something about it. Was that we lending existed before, when everything was going up and it was all really exciting, and so the it never, like, we never hit the caps because everything kept going up. And then at some point, the like Bitcoin, took a dive, and the market took a dive, and JP had made the statement that like lending existed through this. It did not crash. It did not ruin the protocol. Everything about the network was completely according to the way that it was designed. And so I didn't even think about that. Was that like lending really did get tested not too long ago, and it performed as smoothly as possible. So I don't know what it would take for somebody who is very, very critical and against lending to go and continue to say, like, what kind of crash would it take for the spiral for this hypothetical spiral to happen. I'm curious about what that would be, but we did see lending get tested, and it was fine. I'm all about it, man. I'm in support of teaching it. We've got the mathematics behind it. We've got the caps in place. We've written the articles, and again, like we've responded with from our THORChain University account to folks who are very critical of it on crypto Twitter, and nobody's going to read it who doesn't want to read it, and they're convinced they're right, and they're allowed to feel that they're convinced they're right. So again, it comes down to who wants to learn and be open to it. But I really liked that JP had said that. It kind of dawned on me, like, oh, like the test has occurred, and we did fine. We passed. So does that answer what you were after?
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of double click on it a little bit more, I think, a lot of people are looking at lending and they're talking about these different, doomsday scenarios of,
Yeah.
if the price goes down to this price, then, the whole thing blows up. And I did also see that, post from JP
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about, yeah, that Rune survived, a pretty, I mean, it was, I forgot what the exact number was. I think it was a 25% correction in the price of Bitcoin,
Yeah.
something like that. And, THORChain held up perfectly fine. And, the lending did not blow up the protocol.
Yeah.
Um, So if you were to kind of look at the positives and negatives of it, what do you see? Like, let's say that some of these people have some level of correctness when it comes to the price of Rune going down, with the broader market. What do you see as kind of some of the pros and cons of having lending, in place? Do you see, some hypothetical major risk? I know you're obviously in favor of lending, but if you try to see it from their side, what do you see as kind of those pros and cons on either the downside? Because I've also seen some arguments that the upside of crypto could potentially cause problems because basically what lending is doing is hoping that Rune outperforms Bitcoin and everything else. So if you kind of try to take the other side, how do you see things on both ends, upside and downside?
Huh. I huh. I you stumped me. I've been on this. I've been in like solid shoes on this side for so long. Um, I would have to see it, man. Like I don't know if the caps are in place. I I I I feel pretty confident in my position. I don't know, man. You've got me stumped. You're trying to get me to say something. I uh I don't know. I,
Yeah, no,
I
I
mean,
mean,
like it's an unforeseen circumstance in my mind that this could happen. And like, look, I was there for Terra. Like, in fact, I was. We were like one day before signing a big contract to help develop Terra University, and that was the day before UST depegged. So that was something I couldn't see, right? So I'm not saying that I have all the answers, and I could be wrong, but as of right now, where I'm sitting, um, I see that THORChain has put in place um, parameters that Terra did not. So I don't know the downside. Ugh, the downside of lending. I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
no, you're good.
I
I
love
mean,
it.
I think it's important to ask, these questions and just kind of think about it.
Yeah,
Obviously, and one thing I love is that I've had a lot of conversations about lending and
I've
what
read
I think
all of
about it.
Tyler Reynolds's posts about it, so like I understand where it's coming from. So
Right.
I've read it. I just, but every time that I read something like that, I have a response. So to agree with it is tough.
Yeah, and I really haven't seen a great argument, to be fair. So I asked JP the same question when we had him on for a previous chain chatter, and
Yeah,
um,
I'm curious about what he said.
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that really to any question about I would say the blow up risk of the protocol, there is a good answer. It's not like there's some,
Yeah,
shady answer, especially going back. And I was also pretty heavily, involved with Terra, and the whole like Anchor UST protocol.
yeah,
Um, and, when you would ask questions about the health of the protocol, you'd kind of get some shady answers. And then,
I remember.
obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then you obviously have the huge meme of, steady lads deploying, Bitcoin to save the protocol.
Right, right, right.
And with THORChain, you don't have that like steady lads type of answer.
Not
One
at
thing
all.
I love to point people to the dashboard, the Nine Realms lending dashboard.
Yeah,
And you can see, the complete loan closure scenario and
yeah.
how all that math plays out. So, yeah, I threw you a question where I don't think there's an actually good answer. So, I actually think that's a good response that you
I
have.
wish Tyler Reynolds was in here. He would. I'm sure he would have an answer. Um, but yeah, like I've read all of the. I've been there. I've been in there for all the conversations. Sometimes I just sit and like a bird in a tree and watch. But I'm saying the answer to myself. And again, like JP, I'm sure did. He had a good answer for everything, and it's transparent. And there is an answer for it. So I'm yeah, you stumped me because I can't I can't pretend that the answer isn't this the safety of it is present. So the downside is, a speculation, I guess. Like if we were to have some sort of negative for lending, it is external speculation on the risks of, like on the possible risks, the potential risks of how the visibility of it might affect the protocol. Not even the actual mechanism of it, but the perception of the mechanism. So that is, I think, as far as I can go for the risk. Like, people don't want to mess with THORChain because of lending, despite it being a safe mechanism. So that to me would be the bad thing, I guess, is people don't want to touch it because of it, even though it's touchable.
Right. Yeah. And I think pointing people to the numbers and, like I said, that dashboard where it's like, okay, well, show me at what numbers this whole thing implodes like you
Yeah.
think it's going to. And, if they can't come out with concrete numbers, then I guess you can kind of pick which side you land on.